Hidden within Numbers lies the most shocking truth in Scripture. God's chosen people voted against their own miracle. Picture this: 600,000 warriors who witnessed the Red Sea split, Mount Sinai shake, and daily bread fall from heaven. Yet when faced with giants, they chose slavery over promise. But Numbers isn't about their failure. It's about God's relentless faithfulness. Watch Him transform chaos into divine order, turn curses into blessings, and make even talking donkeys prophesy His will. This book reveals God's governmental blueprint, how He organizes nations, disciplines rebellion, and fulfills promises despite human betrayal. Every plague, every victory, every wandering step was orchestrated for one purpose: to show that God's word never fails, even when His people do. Numbers is the ultimate lesson in divine persistence, where 40 years of consequences become 40 years of preparation. Get ready to discover why this overlooked book holds the key to understanding God's justice, mercy, and unstoppable plan for humanity. The wilderness of Sinai buzzed with activity as God called Moses to action. Chapter 1, verse 1 sets the scene perfectly. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of meeting, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. Exactly 13 months had passed since the great escape from Egypt, and God was ready to transform His people into something extraordinary. The command came with crystal clarity in verse 3. From 20 years old and upward, all who are able to go to war in Israel, you and Aaron shall number them by their armies. This wasn't about counting everyone. God wanted only fighting men, warriors who could carry weapons and march into battle. Women, children, elderly men, and boys under 20 weren't part of this military census. Moses and Aaron began their massive task, going tribe by tribe through the camp. The process was methodical and precise. Each man had to prove his tribal heritage and state his age clearly. From Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, came 46,500 fighting men ready for war. Simeon presented an impressive 59,300 warriors to Moses and Aaron. The tribe of Gad stepped forward with 45,600 soldiers, while Judah brought the largest force, a massive 74,600 fighting men. Issachar contributed 54,400 warriors, and Zebulun added 57,400 more to God's growing army. The numbers kept climbing as tribe after tribe presented their military strength. Ephraim counted out 40,500 men, while their brother tribe Manasseh brought 32,200 fighters. Benjamin, despite being one of the smaller tribes, still produced 35,400 warriors ready for battle. Dan marched forward with 62,700 fighting men, showing their strength and determination. Asher presented 41,500 soldiers to be counted, and Naphtali completed the census with 53,400 warriors. Verse 46 records the stunning final total. All who were numbered were 603,550. Over 600,000 fighting men stood in formation before Moses and Aaron. But one tribe was notably absent from this military count. Verse 47 explains why. But the Levites were not numbered among them by their father's tribe. God had different plans for Levi's descendants, plans that would become clear in the chapters ahead. God's organizational genius became clear as He revealed His camping plan to Moses and Aaron. Chapter 2, verse 2 contains the master blueprint. Every one of the children of Israel shall camp by his own standard, beside the emblems of his father's house. They shall camp some distance from the tabernacle of meeting. The arrangement wasn't random. It was mathematical perfection. God placed each tribe in a specific location around the central tabernacle, creating both protection and order. The eastern side belonged to Judah, The royal tribe. Verse 3 identifies their position. On the east side, toward the rising of the sun, those of the standard of the forces with Judah shall camp according to their armies. Judah didn't stand alone on the east. Issachar and Zebulun joined them, creating a powerful eastern coalition. Verse 9 gives their combined strength. All who were numbered according to their armies of the forces with Judah, 186,400. When it came time to march, this eastern force would lead the way. The south side became Reuben's territory. Verse 10 establishes their position. On the south side shall be the standard of the forces with Reuben, according to their armies. Simeon and Gad flanked Reuben, forming the southern defense. Their total force numbered 151,450 warriors, a formidable army protecting the camp's southern approach. Ephraim commanded the western side. As verse 18 declares, on the west side shall be the standard of the forces with Ephraim, according to their armies. Manasseh and Benjamin joined Ephraim in this western alliance, bringing their combined strength to 108,100 fighting men. The north belonged to Dan, whose standard flew proudly, as verse 25 states. The standard of the forces with Dan shall be on the north side, according to their armies. Asher and Naphtali completed the northern defense, creating an army of 157,600 warriors facing any threat from the north. At the very center of this massive formation sat the tabernacle, God's earthly home. The Levites camped immediately around it, forming the inner circle of protection. From above, the entire camp formed a perfect cross, with the holy presence of God at its heart. Every tribe knew exactly where they belonged in God's divine design. While the other tribes prepared for war, God had entirely different plans for the descendants of Levi. Chapter 3, verse 12 reveals God's special choice. Now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn who opened the womb among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall be mine. This wasn't arbitrary. It was deeply personal. When God killed Egypt's firstborn sons but spared Israel's, every firstborn Israelite became his property. But instead of taking one son from each family, God chose an entire tribe to serve him. The Levites became substitutes for all of Israel's firstborn sons. God divided the Levites into 3 distinct family groups, each with specialized duties. The Gershonites received responsibility for the tabernacle's soft furnishings. Chapter 3, verse 25 details their work. The duties of the children of Gershon in the tabernacle of meeting included the tabernacle, the tent with its covering, the screen for the door of the tabernacle of meeting, the screen of the court, the covering of the door of the court, which is around the tabernacle and the altar, and their cords, according to all the work relating to them. The Kohathites got the most sacred and dangerous job, caring for the holy furniture inside the tabernacle. Chapter 3, verse 31 lists their precious cargo. Their duty included the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, the utensils of the sanctuary, with which they ministered, the screen, and all the work relating to them. But chapter 4, verse 15 gives the Kohathites a life-or-death warning. And when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy utensils when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them. But they shall not touch any holy thing, lest they die. These are the things in the tabernacle of meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. The Merarites handled the tabernacle's structural elements. Chapter 4, verse 31 describes their heavy load, and this is what they must carry as all their service for the tabernacle of meeting: the boards of the tabernacle, its bars, its pillars, its sockets, and the pillars around the court with their sockets, pegs, and cords, with all their furnishings and all their service. Moses counted each Levite family carefully. The Gershonites numbered 7,500 men from 30 years old to 50. The Kohathites counted 8,600 in the same age range. The Merarites totaled 6,200 workers. Together, these 22,300 Levites formed God's dedicated service team, replacing military duty with sacred work. God's presence in the camp demanded absolute purity, both physical and moral. Chapter 5, verse 2 contains his stern command to Moses. Command the children of Israel that they put out of the camp every leper, everyone who has a discharge, and whoever becomes defiled by a corpse. The rules were strict and clear. Anyone with any skin disease had to leave the camp immediately. People with unusual bodily discharges, whether male or female, were sent outside the community. Even touching a dead body made someone unclean and required temporary exile from the camp. Verse 3 explains God's reasoning. You shall put out both male and female. You shall put them outside the camp, that they may not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell. God lived among his people, and his holiness couldn't tolerate contamination of any kind. But physical cleanliness wasn't God's only concern. He also cared deeply about moral purity, especially in marriage relationships. When a husband suspected his wife of adultery but had no witnesses or proof, Chapter 5 provided a supernatural solution through the bitter water test. The suspicious husband would bring his wife to the priest along with a grain offering. Verse 15 describes this offering. Then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. He shall bring the offering required for her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil on it and put no frankincense on it, because it is a grain offering of jealousy, an offering for remembering, for bringing iniquity to remembrance. The priest would take holy water in an earthen vessel and mix it with dust from the tabernacle floor. Then came the solemn oath ceremony, as verse 19 records. And the priest shall put her under oath, and say to the woman, If no man has lain with you, and if you have not gone astray to uncleanness while under your husband's authority, be free from this bitter water that brings a curse. If the woman was guilty, verse 27 describes the supernatural punishment. When he has made her drink the water, then it shall be, if she has defiled herself and behaved unfaithfully toward her husband, that the water that brings a curse will enter her and become bitter, and her belly will swell, her thigh will rot, and the woman will become a curse among her people. But if she was innocent, verse 28 promises blessing. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be free and may conceive children. This divine test put matters of faithfulness directly into God's hands. For those who wanted to show extraordinary devotion to God, Chapter 6 introduces a special option, the Nazirite vow. Verse 2 explains who could take this vow. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when either a man or woman consecrates himself to make a vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to the Lord. The Nazirite vow involved 3 strict requirements that set these devoted individuals apart from everyone else. The first restriction involved alcohol and grapes. Verse 3 is completely clear. He shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. This wasn't just about avoiding wine. Nazirites couldn't consume anything that came from the grapevine. No grape juice, no raisins, no fresh grapes. Even wine vinegar was forbidden. This complete separation from the vine showed their total commitment to God. The second requirement involved their hair. Verse 5 states, All the days of the vow of his separation, no razor shall come upon his head, until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. Then he shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow. Their long hair became a visible sign of their special dedication. The third and most difficult requirement involved contact with dead bodies. Verse 7 explains the extent of this restriction. He shall not make himself unclean, even for his father or his mother, for his brother or his sister, when they die, because his consecration to God is on his head. Even when their closest family members died, Nazirites couldn't attend funerals or touch the bodies. Their commitment to God had to come before even the most natural family obligations. This showed the ultimate level of devotion possible under God's law. When the vow period ended, verses 13 and 18 describe the completion ceremony. Now this is the law of the Nazirite. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall be brought to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the Nazirite shall shave his consecrated head at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and shall take the hair from his consecrated head and put it on the fire that is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. The dedication of the tabernacle called for celebration, and the tribal leaders responded with incredible generosity. Chapter 7 verse 3 describes their initial group gift. And they brought their offering before the Lord, 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, a cart for every 2 of the leaders, and for each one an ox. And they presented them before the tabernacle. Moses gave these carts and oxen to the Levites for their work. The Gershonites received 2 carts and 4 oxen for carrying the tabernacle's curtains and coverings. The Merarites got 4 carts and 8 oxen for the heavy structural pieces. But the Kohathites received nothing because they had to carry the sacred furniture on their shoulders. Then came 12 days of individual tribal offerings. Each leader brought identical gifts, creating a magnificent display of unity and equality. Verse 13 lists the standard offering. His offering was 1 silver platter, the weight of which was 130 shekels, and 1 silver bowl of 70 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, both of them full of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering. Each leader also brought verse 14's precious gift, 1 gold pan of 10 shekels, full of incense. Gold was incredibly valuable, and filling these pans with expensive incense showed remarkable devotion. The animal offerings were equally impressive. Verse 15 describes the burnt offerings, 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 1 male lamb in its first year as a burnt offering. Verse 16 adds 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering. Finally, verse 17 lists the peace offerings. And as the sacrifice of peace offerings, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 male goats, and 5 male lambs in their first year. Day after day, the same magnificent gifts appeared. Nahshon of Judah started the procession on day 1. Nethanel of Issachar followed on day 2. Eliab of Zebulun brought his identical offering on day 3. The pattern continued for 12 full days, each tribe showing equal honor to God. Verse 84 provides the amazing final tally. This was the dedication offering for the altar from the leaders of Israel when it was anointed. 12 silver platters, 12 silver bowls, and 12 gold pans. The repetition wasn't boring. It was beautiful, showing that every tribe held equal importance in God's eyes. Before the Levites could begin their sacred service, they needed thorough preparation. Chapter 8, verse 6 records God's detailed instructions to Moses. Take the Levites from among the children of Israel and cleanse them ceremonially. The cleansing process was intense and symbolic. Verse 7 outlines the steps. Thus you shall do to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of purification on them, and let them shave all their body, and let them wash their clothes, and so make themselves clean. First came the sprinkling with special water, water mixed with ashes from a sin offering, symbolizing purification from sin. Then the Levites had to shave their entire bodies, removing every hair as a sign of complete renewal. Finally, they washed their clothes, making everything fresh and clean. The ceremony required specific offerings. Verse 8 describes what was needed. Then let them take a young bull with its grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, and you shall take another young bull as a sin offering. But the most unusual part of the ceremony came next. Aaron literally lifted the Levites up as a wave offering before the Lord. Verse 11 describes this remarkable scene. And Aaron shall offer the Levites before the Lord, like a wave offering from the children of Israel, that they may perform the work of the Lord. Picture this: grown men being physically lifted up and waved before God, like sheaves of grain or pieces of bread. This wave offering showed that the Levites belonged completely to God, just like the sacrificial offerings waved at the altar. Verse 12 continues the ceremony. Then the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the young bulls, and you shall offer one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering to the Lord, to make atonement for the Levites. God explains the purpose in verse 16. For they are wholly given to me from among the children of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead, of all who open the womb, the firstborn of all the children of Israel. The Levites became living substitutes for Israel's firstborn sons. Verses 24 and 25 set the age limits for Levite service. This is what applies to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, one may enter to perform service in the work of the tabernacle of meeting. And at the age of 50 years, they must cease performing this work. God provided Israel with perfect guidance through a supernatural navigation system. Chapter 9, verse 15 describes their divine GPS. Now, on the day that the tabernacle was raised up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony. From evening until morning, it was above the tabernacle like the appearance of fire. This wasn't an ordinary cloud. During the day, it provided shade and direction. At night, it glowed like fire, giving light and warmth to the camp below. But the cloud did much more than just hover. It became Israel's travel instructor. Verse 17 explains the simple system. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, after that the children of Israel would journey. And in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. When the cloud moved, they moved. When it stopped, they stopped. The timing wasn't predictable. Sometimes the cloud stayed put for days, forcing Israel to remain in one location. Verse 20 describes their patient obedience. So it was, when the cloud was above the tabernacle many days, then the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not journey. Other times, the cloud moved quickly. Verse 21 shows how they had to be ready. So it was, when the cloud remained only from evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they would journey. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud was taken up, they would journey. Verse 22 reveals the extremes. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or a year that the cloud remained above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But when it was taken up, they would journey. Perfect obedience to God's timing, whether convenient or not. God also provided a communication system through silver trumpets. Chapter 10, verse 2 contains his instructions to Moses. Make 2 silver trumpets for yourself. You shall make them of hammered work. You shall use them for calling the congregation and for directing the movement of the camps. These weren't decorative instruments, they were practical communication tools. Verse 3 explains one signal. When they blow both of them, all the congregation shall gather before you at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. 2 trumpets meant everyone should come. Verse 4 describes a different signal. But if they blow only one, then the leaders, the heads of the divisions of Israel, shall gather to you. One trumpet called just the leadership for important meetings. Different trumpet sounds meant different things. Verse 5 describes the march signal. When you sound the advance, the camps that lie on the east side shall then begin their journey. Verse 6 continues. When you sound the advance the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall begin their journey. Verse 9 even describes wartime use. When you go to war in your land against the enemy who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. With the cloud for navigation and trumpets for communication, God had equipped his people with everything they needed to move as one massive, organized army through the wilderness. The honeymoon period was over. After all God's careful organization, the people began showing their true hearts. Chapter 11. Verse 1 records the beginning of Israel's downward spiral. Now, when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them, and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. The complaints weren't specific at first, just general grumbling about their circumstances. But God heard every word, and his response was immediate and terrifying. Divine fire swept through the outer edges of the camp, killing people who had been murmuring against their situation. Verse 2 shows Moses' response. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. Moses interceded, and God stopped the deadly flames. They named that place Taberah, meaning burning, as a reminder of what happened when they complained against God. But the fire was just the beginning. Soon the complaints became more specific and dangerous. Verse 4 introduces the real troublemakers. Now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, "Who will give us meat to eat?" These weren't pure Israelites, but foreigners who had joined them when they left Egypt. Their bad attitude spread like a disease through the camp. Verse 5 shows how the complaining escalated. We remember the fish, which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Amazing. They were romanticizing their slavery, remembering only the food and forgetting the whips, the beatings, and the killing of their baby boys. Verse 6 reveals their attitude toward God's provision. But now our whole being is dried up. There is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. God had been feeding them supernatural bread from heaven every single day. But they were tired of it. They wanted meat and variety. Their ungratefulness reached God's ears, and he was furious. Moses felt overwhelmed by their constant complaining. Verse 11 records his honest prayer. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you afflicted your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you have laid the burden of all these people on me?" He was ready to quit, asking God in verse 15, "Please kill me here and now, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness." God's response was twofold. First, he would share the leadership burden by appointing 70 elders. But second, He would give the people exactly what they wanted: meat, in a way they would never forget. Verse 18 records God's promise. Then you shall say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. But this wouldn't be a small portion. Verse 19 continues, you shall eat, not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have despised the Lord who is among you. God sent an incredible wind that brought quail from the sea. Verse 31 describes the supernatural abundance. Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea and left them fluttering. Near the camp, about a day's journey on this side and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits high above the surface of the ground. The people gathered quail for 2 full days and nights. Even the person who gathered least collected 10 homers, that's about 60 bushels of birds. But verse 33 reveals the terrible price. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. Many died while the meat was still in their mouths. They called that place Kibroth Hattaavah, meaning graves of craving. Just when Moses thought things couldn't get worse, betrayal came from the most unexpected source: his own family. Chapter 12, verse 1 records the shocking accusation. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. Miriam, the sister who had watched over baby Moses in the river, and Aaron, the brother who had been Moses' spokesman before Pharaoh, now turned against him. They criticized his marriage to a Cushite woman. But their real issue wasn't his marriage, it was jealousy. Verse 2 reveals their true complaint. So they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. They wanted equal authority with Moses. After all, Miriam was a prophetess, and Aaron was the high priest. Why should Moses be the only one who spoke directly with God? But they had made a serious mistake. Verse 3 gives us crucial information. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Moses wasn't seeking power. He was simply obeying God's call. God's response was immediate and personal. Verse 4 states, suddenly the Lord said to Moses, Aaron and Miriam, come out, you 3, to the tabernacle of meeting. So the 3 came out. God called all 3 siblings to a divine conference. When they arrived, verse 5 describes what happened. Then the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. God separated Moses from his siblings, making it clear that Moses held a unique position. God then explained the difference between Moses and other prophets. Verses 6 through 8 contain his explanation. Then he said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? Other prophets received dreams and visions that needed interpretation. But Moses spoke with God face to face, like a friend talking to a friend. He saw God's form and heard his voice clearly. Attacking Moses was like attacking God himself. Verse 9 records God's anger. So the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and he departed. When the cloud lifted, Aaron turned to look at his sister and got the shock of his life. Verse 10 describes the horrible sight. And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. Then Aaron looked at Miriam, and there she was, leprous. Miriam's skin had turned white with leprosy, the most feared disease of the ancient world. Aaron immediately realized the seriousness of their sin. Verse 11 records his desperate plea. So Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, please do not lay on us the sin in which we have done foolishly and in which we have sinned." Aaron begged Moses not to let Miriam die from this disease. Verse 12 contains his heartbreaking comparison. "Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb." Moses immediately interceded for his sister, showing his forgiving heart. Verse 13 records his simple prayer. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "Please heal her, O God, I pray." Despite Miriam's attack on his authority, Moses immediately asked God to heal her. God's response showed both mercy and justice. Verse 14 states, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'If her father had but spit in her face, would she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and afterward she may be received again.'" Miriam would be healed, but she had to bear the shame of isolation for a full week. After all the complaining and rebellion, God decided it was time to move toward the Promised Land. Chapter 13, verse 1 records his command. "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, everyone a leader among them.'" This wasn't Moses' idea. It was God's command. He wanted one leader from each tribe to explore the land and bring back a report. These weren't ordinary men, but the top leaders, the most respected individuals from each tribal group. Moses gave them specific instructions. Verse 18 records part of his briefing. "See what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many." He wanted to know about the inhabitants, their numbers, and their military strength. Verse 19 continues, "Whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds." Moses needed intelligence about the land itself and the type of fortifications they would face. Verse 20 adds, "Whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests there or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land." He encouraged them to be brave and bring back samples of the land's produce. The timing was perfect. Verse 20 notes, "Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes." They would see the land at its most beautiful and productive time. The 12 spies spent 40 days exploring every part of Canaan. Verse 23 describes one of their discoveries. "Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between 2 of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The grapes were so large that it took 2 men to carry one cluster on a pole between them." This was clear evidence of the land's incredible fertility and God's promise of abundance. When they returned to Kadesh, the whole congregation gathered to hear their report. Verse 27 records the beginning. "Then they told him and said, 'We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit.' Everything started well. They confirmed that the land was exactly what God had promised, flowing with milk and honey. The fruit they brought proved God's words were true. But then came the devastating word, nevertheless. Verse 28 contains the beginning of their bad report. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The descendants of Anak were giants, legendary warriors known for their massive size. Verse 29 continues, the Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Fear began spreading through the crowd like wildfire. But one man refused to give in to fear. Verse 30 records Caleb's brave response. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." The other 10 spies immediately contradicted Caleb. Verse 31 contains their fearful response. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." The people's response to the spies' report was immediate and catastrophic. Chapter 14 verse 1 describes their reaction. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. Instead of celebrating God's faithfulness, they spent the night crying in fear and despair. But crying wasn't enough. Verse 2 records their incredible complaint. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness." They actually wished they were dead rather than facing the challenge of trusting God. Their complaint escalated into accusation against God Himself. Verse 3 reveals their faithlessness. "Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" Then came the most shocking moment in Israel's history. Verse 4 records their democratic decision. So they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." They voted to reject God's promise and return to slavery. Moses and Aaron were devastated. Verse 5 states, "Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. They threw themselves down in grief, knowing the people had just made a catastrophic mistake." Joshua and Caleb made one last desperate attempt to change their minds. Verse 6 records their dramatic action. But Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. Verses 7 and 8 contain their passionate plea. "And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, 'The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then He will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey.'" But verse 10 shows the people's response. "And all the congregation said to stone them with stones." Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. They wanted to kill the 2 faithful spies. At that moment, God's glory appeared. His patience had reached its limit. Verse 11 records His words. "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'How long will these people reject me? And how long will they not believe me with all the signs which I have performed among them?'" God was ready to destroy the entire nation. Verse 12 reveals His plan. "I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they." But Moses interceded for the people. God listened and agreed not to destroy them completely, but there would still be consequences. Verses 28 and 29 contain God's judgment. Say to them, "As I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness, all of you who were numbered, according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above. Everyone 20 years and older would die in the wilderness. Only Joshua and Caleb would survive from that generation." Verse 34 declares, "According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection." 40 years of wilderness, wandering for 40 days of faithless spying. After the devastating judgment of 40 years in the wilderness, God surprised everyone by giving laws for life in the Promised Land. Chapter 15, verse 1 contains his encouraging words. "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you have come into the land you are to inhabit, which I am giving to you." Notice God didn't say, "If you come into the land," but "when you come." Despite the current generation's faithlessness, God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would still be fulfilled. Their children would inherit what their parents had rejected. Verses 2 and 3 continue with specific instructions. "And you make an offering by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering or a sacrifice, to fulfill a vow, or as a free will offering, or in your appointed feasts, to make a sweet aroma to the Lord, from the herd or the flock." God gave detailed instructions for offerings they would bring once they settled in Canaan. These laws showed God's confidence in his ultimate plan. The current generation might die in the wilderness, but their children would need these regulations when they finally entered the land flowing with milk and honey. But the chapter also contains a sobering reminder about the importance of obedience. Verses 32 through 36 tell the story of a man who thought God's laws were optional. Now, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him under guard because it had not been explained what should be done to him. The Sabbath command was clear: no work on the seventh day. But this man decided to gather sticks anyway, perhaps thinking it was just a small thing. Maybe he needed firewood for cooking or warmth. But God had said no work, and that meant no work at all. Moses didn't know what punishment to give, so he asked God directly. Verses 35 and 36 record God's shocking response. "Then the Lord said to Moses, The man must surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp." So, as the Lord commanded Moses, all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died. One man died for gathering sticks. This wasn't cruel, it was necessary. God had to show the entire nation that his commands weren't suggestions. After all the rebellion and complaining, someone had to demonstrate that God's word meant exactly what it said. The story served as a warning to everyone. If gathering sticks on the Sabbath deserved death, how much more serious was it to reject God's promise of the promised land? The man's death reminded Israel that God's patience had limits. The rebellion against Moses' authority wasn't finished. Chapter 16, verse 1 introduces a new challenger. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and on the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. Korah was a Levite, a member of the tribe set apart for God's service. But he wasn't satisfied with his position. He wanted more power, more authority, more recognition. He wanted Aaron's job as high priest and Moses' position as leader. Verse 2 describes his supporters. And they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel. 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. These weren't random troublemakers, but respected leaders, men with influence and standing in the community. Verse 3 contains their accusation against Moses and Aaron. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves. For all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" Their argument sounded reasonable. After all, God had said that all Israel was a holy nation. Why should Moses and Aaron have special authority? Wasn't this supposed to be a democracy where everyone was equal? But Korah's real motivation wasn't equality. It was jealousy. He wanted Aaron's position as high priest. The other rebels wanted Moses' position as civil leader. This was a corporate coup designed to overthrow God's appointed leadership. Moses' response showed both wisdom and faith. Verse 4 states, "So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face." He didn't argue or defend himself, but went straight to God in prayer. Then Moses proposed a test. Verses 6 and 7 contain his challenge. And Moses said to Korah and all his company, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Do this. Take censers, Korah, and all your company." The test was simple, but dangerous. Each man would offer incense before the Lord, and God would show who he had chosen as priest. This wasn't a popularity contest, but a divine selection process. Moses also addressed the underlying issue with the Levites. Verses 8 through 10 contain his pointed question. Then Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to serve them? And he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you. And are you seeking the priesthood also?" Korah and his fellow Levites already had an incredible privilege. They served in God's house while other tribes worked regular jobs. But they wanted more. They wanted Aaron's unique position as high priest. The next morning, the test began. Verse 18 describes the scene. So every man took his censer and put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. 250 men plus Aaron stood ready with their censers, waiting for God's judgment. God's response was immediate and terrifying. Verse 31 records what happened. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them. The earth literally opened up beneath the rebels. Verse 32 continues the amazing scene. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and their families disappeared into the ground alive. Verse 33 describes their fate. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. The ground swallowed them completely, and then closed up again, as if nothing had happened. But God wasn't finished. Verse 35 states, "And a fire came out from the Lord, and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense." Divine fire killed all 250 men who had challenged Aaron's priesthood. The message was unmistakable. God had chosen Moses as leader and Aaron as high priest. Anyone who challenged these appointments was challenging God himself, and the consequences were deadly. Even after the dramatic deaths of Korah and his followers, some people still questioned Aaron's authority as high priest. God decided to settle the matter once and for all with a supernatural sign. Chapter 17, verse 1, records his instructions. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and get from them a rod from each leader according to their fathers' houses, 12 rods. Write each man's name on his rod." This test would be fair and transparent. Each tribal leader would provide a rod, a wooden staff that represented their authority. All 12 rods would be identical, except for the names written on them. Verse 3 gives special instructions about one particular rod. "And you shall write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi. For there shall be one rod for the head of each father's house." Aaron's name went on Levi's rod, since he was that tribe's leader and high priest. Moses collected all 12 rods and placed them in the most sacred location possible. Verse 4 states, "Then you shall place them in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony, where I meet with you." The rods were placed before the Ark of the Covenant, in the very presence of God. God explained what would happen. Verse 5 contains his promise. "And it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose will blossom. Thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Israel, which they speak against you." Only the rod of God's chosen priest would show supernatural life. The next morning brought an amazing sight. Verse 8 describes what Moses found. "Now it happened on the next day that Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds." Aaron's rod had done more than just blossom. It had produced buds, flowers, and fully ripe almonds all at the same time. This was impossible in nature, but easy for God. The rod showed the complete cycle of life in one night. Moses brought all the rods out for everyone to see. Verse 9 states, "Then Moses brought out all the rods from before the Lord to all the children of Israel. And they looked, and each man took his rod." 11 rods looked exactly the same as when they went in. Only Aaron's rod showed supernatural life. The sign was undeniable. God had clearly chosen Aaron as his high priest. Verse 10 records God's final instruction. "And the Lord said to Moses, Bring Aaron's rod back before the testimony, to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die." The rod would remain as permanent proof of Aaron's divine appointment. God knew that death would be common during the 40 years of wilderness wandering. So he provided a way for people to be purified after contact with dead bodies. Chapter 19, verse 2 contains his unusual instructions. "This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect and on which a yoke has never come." The red heifer had to be perfect, completely red with no other colored hairs, no physical defects, and never used for work. Verse 3 continues, "You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered before him." The ceremony was unusual because it happened outside the camp, not at the altar. Verse 4 describes Eleazar's role. "And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times, directly in front of the tabernacle of meeting." Then came the burning. Verse 5 states, "Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its hide, its flesh, its blood, and its offal shall be burned. The entire animal was consumed by fire, creating ashes that would be used for purification. Verse 6 adds special ingredients to the fire. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. These items added symbolic meaning to the ceremony. The ashes were carefully collected and stored. Verse 9 explains their purpose. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and store them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for the water of purification. It is for purifying from sin. When someone touched a dead body, they mixed these ashes with water and sprinkled the mixture on the unclean person. This water of separation restored their ritual purity and allowed them to rejoin the community. Years later, during the final phase of wilderness wandering, the people faced a different kind of crisis. Chapter 21, verse 4 describes their response. Then they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. The long detour around Edom frustrated them, and they fell back into their old pattern of complaining. Verse 5 records their bitter words. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread. Once again, they attacked God's provision and complained about the manna. They called God's supernatural bread worthless and accused him of bringing them to the wilderness to die. God's response was swift and deadly. Verse 6 states, So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Poisonous snakes invaded the camp, and their bites killed many Israelites. The people quickly realized their mistake. Verse 7 records their repentance. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people. But God's solution was unexpected. Instead of removing the snakes, he provided a way of healing. Verse 8 contains his instructions. Then the Lord said to Moses, Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. Moses created a bronze serpent and lifted it up on a pole in the center of the camp. Verse 9 describes the result. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. The cure seemed too simple to work. People who were dying from snake bites just had to look at the bronze serpent to be healed. No medicine, no complex ceremony, no expensive payment, just a simple look of faith toward God's provision. Some people probably thought it was foolish. Others might have preferred a more complicated solution. But God's way was simple: look and live. Those who trusted God's word and looked at the bronze serpent were instantly healed. Those who refused to look died from the poison. The bronze serpent remained as a symbol of God's power to heal and his willingness to provide salvation even in the midst of judgment. After 38 years of wilderness wandering, the people faced another water crisis that would change everything. The congregation had gathered at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. And chapter 20 verse 2 describes their familiar problem. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. The old generation was mostly gone, but the new generation had inherited the same complaining spirit. Verse 3 records their bitter accusation. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. They wished they had perished with Korah's rebels rather than face this water shortage. Their complaints escalated quickly. Verse 4 contains their attack. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? Once again, they blamed their leaders instead of trusting God's provision. Moses and Aaron went straight to God for help. Verse 6 states, "So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them." God's response was clear and specific. Verses 7 and 8 contain his detailed instructions. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the rod. You and your brother Aaron gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock and give drink to the congregation and their animals." The command was simple. Take the rod, gather the people, and speak to the rock. God would provide water when Moses spoke to the stone. This would demonstrate God's power in a gentle, miraculous way. Moses took the rod as commanded. Verse 9 confirms, "So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he commanded him." He and Aaron gathered all the people in front of the rock, ready to perform the miracle. But something went wrong. Moses was angry and frustrated after decades of leading complainers. Verse 10 records his harsh words. "And Moses said to them, 'Hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock?' Instead of speaking to the rock, Moses spoke angrily to the people. Then Moses made his fatal mistake. Verse 11 describes what happened. Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Instead of speaking to the rock, Moses struck it twice. Water flowed out abundantly, but Moses had disobeyed God's specific command. God's judgment came immediately. Verse 12 contains his devastating words. "Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them." One act of disobedience cost Moses his lifelong dream. He would not enter the promised land himself. Soon after Meribah, God called for another major transition. Aaron had reached the end of his earthly service. Verse 23 records God's command. "And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor, by the border of the land of Edom, saying," God's message was direct and final. Verse 24 contains his pronouncement. "Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah." Like Moses, Aaron would not enter the promised land because of their disobedience at Meribah. The priesthood needed to pass to the next generation. God provided specific instructions for this transition. Verse 25 states, "Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor." The transfer would happen on the mountain, in sight of all Israel. Verse 26 describes the ceremony. "And strip Aaron of his garments, and put them on Eleazar his son. For Aaron shall be gathered to his people, and die there." The high priestly garments would be transferred from father to son. Moses obeyed exactly. Verse 27 records, "So Moses did just as the Lord commanded, and they went up to Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation." On the mountain, the ceremony took place. Verse 28 describes the transfer. "Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them on Eleazar his son. and Aaron died there on the top of the mount. Then Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. Aaron died wearing ordinary clothes, while his son descended wearing the sacred garments. When they returned without Aaron, the nation understood. Verse 29 records their response. Now when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. As Israel moved through the wilderness, they began encountering enemies who tried to block their progress. But something had changed. Instead of running in fear, Israel started winning battles. Chapter 21 verse 1 describes their first confrontation. The king of Arad, the Canaanite, who dwelt in the south, heard that Israel was coming on the road to Atharim. Then he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. Israel's response was different from 40 years earlier. Verse 2 records their bold approach. So Israel made a vow to the Lord and said, "If you will indeed deliver this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities." Instead of panicking, they asked God for help. God answered their prayer. Verse 3 states, "And the Lord listened to the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them and their cities." So the name of that place was called Hormah. As they continued, Israel faced their biggest test yet. They needed passage through territories controlled by powerful kings. Verses 21 and 22 describe their request to King Sihon. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into fields or vineyards. We will not drink water from wells. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." This was a reasonable request, but Sihon refused. Verse 23 records his response. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel in the wilderness, and he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. The battle was decisive. Verse 24 states, "Then Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as the people of Ammon. For the border of the people of Ammon was fortified." Israel captured all of Sihon's territory and settled in his cities. But the victories weren't finished. King Og of Bashan made the same mistake. Verse 33 records, "And they turned and went up by the way to Bashan. So Og, king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei." Og was a giant, but this generation wasn't afraid. Verse 35 records their complete victory. So they defeated him, his sons, and all his people, until there was no survivor left him, and they took possession of his land. Israel's victories terrified surrounding nations. King Balak of Moab watched the destruction with alarm. Chapter 22 verse 2 describes his fear. Now Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Balak couldn't defeat Israel militarily, so he tried spiritual warfare. Verses 5 and 6 describe his plan. Then he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, "Look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are settling next to me. Therefore, please come at once, curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me." Balaam was a famous prophet whose curses were known to be effective. When the messengers arrived, Balaam consulted God. Verse 12 records God's command. "And God said to Balaam, 'You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed.'" Israel was blessed by God, and no prophet could change that. But under pressure and tempted by wealth, Balaam eventually went to Moab. When Balaam arrived, Balak took him to overlook Israel's camp. But every time Balaam tried to curse Israel, God forced him to bless them instead. Chapter 23, verse 7 contains his first prophecy. And he took up his oracle and said, Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? Or how shall I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? Balak was furious and tried again. The second prophecy was even more positive. Finally, Balaam delivered his most important prophecy. Verses 17 and 18 contain the famous Star of Jacob prophecy. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult. And Edom shall be a possession. Seir also, his enemies, shall be a possession, while Israel does great valiantly. 4 times Balak hired Balaam to curse Israel, and 4 times God turned the curses into blessings. Just when Israel seemed unstoppable, they faced their most dangerous enemy, temptation from within. Chapter 25, verse 1 describes how it began. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. This wasn't random immorality, but calculated seduction. The Moabite women deliberately targeted Israelite men, using attraction to lead them into spiritual compromise. The seduction had a religious component. Verse 2 explains, They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Physical attraction led to religious participation in pagan worship. Verse 3 shows how serious it became. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Baal of Peor was a fertility god whose worship involved sexual rituals and moral corruption. God's response was severe. Verse 4 records his command. Then the Lord said to Moses, Take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord, out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. But while Moses was organizing the response, something shocking happened. Verse 6 describes the scene. And indeed, one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. While people were repenting, one man brazenly brought a Midianite woman into camp. This was open rebellion against God's judgment. One man refused to tolerate this. Verse 7 introduces him. Now, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. Phinehas was Aaron's grandson, a priest who understood the seriousness of spiritual compromise. Verse 8 describes his action. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent, and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body. So the plague was stopped among the children of Israel. Phinehas killed them both, and his zealous action immediately stopped God's plague. Verse 9 records the death toll. And those who died in the plague were 24,000. After the plague, God commanded another census. Chapter 26, verse 1 records the timing. And it came to pass, after the plague, that the Lord spoke to Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saying, This census would reveal how God had preserved his people through 40 years of wandering. Verse 2 contains his instructions. Take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years old and above, by their fathers' houses, all who are able to go to war in Israel. The results were remarkable. Verse 51 records the final number. These are those who were numbered of the children of Israel, 601,730. The first census had counted 603,550 fighting men. This census revealed 601,730 warriors, almost identical numbers. God had maintained Israel's strength despite 40 years of death and judgment. But the most significant aspect wasn't the numbers, it was the people being counted. Verses 63 and 64 explain, "These are those who were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho. But among these, there was not a man of those who were numbered by Moses and Aaron the priest when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. Almost none of the men in the second census had been alive during the first. An entire generation had died, exactly as God predicted. Verse 65 confirms the complete turnover. For the Lord had said of them, "They shall surely die in the wilderness." So there was not left a man of them, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. Only 2 men from the original generation remained, the faithful spies who had trusted God's promise. During the census, an important legal question arose. Chapter 27, verse 1 introduces the case. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, from the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. And these were the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. 5 sisters approached Moses with a legal challenge. Their father had died without sons to inherit his land. Verse 2 describes their approach. And they stood before Moses, before Eleazar the priest, and before the leaders and all the congregation, by the doorway of the tabernacle of meeting, saying, they brought their case before the highest authorities. Verse 3 contains their argument. Our father died in the wilderness, but he was not in the company of those who gathered together against the Lord, in company with Korah. But he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Their question was straightforward. Verse 4 states, "Why should the name of our father be removed from among his family, because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers." Moses took the matter to God. Verse 5 records, "So Moses brought their case before the Lord. God ruled in their favor." Verses 6 and 7 contain his judgment. "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, The daughters of Zelophehad speak what is right. You shall surely give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them." This established new inheritance laws protecting women's property rights. With inheritance laws established, God addressed leadership succession. Moses was 120 years old and forbidden from entering the Promised Land. Time had come to transfer authority. Verse 15 records Moses' concern. Then Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, Moses initiated the succession conversation. Verse 17 describes what Moses wanted in his successor, who may go out before them and go in before them, who may lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be like sheep which have no shepherd. God's choice was clear. Verse 18 states, "And the Lord said to Moses, Take Joshua the son of Nun with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him." Joshua had proven himself as a faithful spy and skilled commander. God gave specific instructions for the commissioning ceremony. Verse 19 continues, "Set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight." The transfer would be public and official. Moses obeyed exactly. Verse 22 records, "So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation." Verse 23 describes the ceremony. "And he laid his hands on him and inaugurated him, just as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses." The laying on of hands symbolized the transfer of authority from the old leader to the new. As Israel prepared for life in the Promised Land, God gave Moses detailed instructions for establishing a complete worship calendar that would govern their spiritual life for generations to come. Chapter 28, verse 1, records the beginning of these comprehensive regulations. "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Command the children of Israel, and say to them, My offering, my food for my offerings, made by fire as a sweet aroma to me, you shall be careful to offer to me at their appointed time.'" God wanted his people to understand that worship wasn't optional or random, but followed a precise schedule that honored him every single day. The daily offerings formed the foundation of Israel's spiritual rhythm. Verse 3 describes the basic requirement. "And you shall say to them, This is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer to the Lord. 2 male lambs in their first year without blemish, day by day, as a regular burnt offering. Every morning and evening, the priests would offer a perfect lamb on the altar, creating a constant connection between God and his people." Verse 4 continues, "The one lamb you shall offer in the morning, the other lamb you shall offer in the evening." This twice daily sacrifice would never stop, creating a rhythm of worship that marked the beginning and end of each day. The Sabbath brought additional offerings beyond the daily sacrifices. Verse 9 states, "And on the Sabbath day, 2 lambs in their first year, without blemish, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with oil, with its drink offering." The 7th day required double the normal offerings, emphasizing its special importance in God's calendar. Monthly celebrations marked the beginning of each new month with trumpet blasts and special sacrifices. Verse 11 describes these new moon offerings. "At the beginnings of your months you shall present a burnt offering to the Lord, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs in their first year, without blemish." These monthly festivals helped Israel track time according to God's calendar rather than pagan systems. Chapter 29 details the most important annual festivals that would shape Israel's spiritual year. The Feast of Trumpets marked the beginning of the 7th month with a holy gathering. Verse 1 states, "And in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work. For you, it is a day of blowing the trumpets." The Day of Atonement followed 10 days later as the most solemn day in Israel's calendar. Verse 7 describes its requirements. "On the 10th day of this 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall afflict your souls. You shall not do any work." This was the one day each year when the high priest entered the most holy place to make atonement for the entire nation's sins. The Festival of Tabernacles concluded the sacred 7th month with 7 days of celebration. Verse 12 records its beginning. "On the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work, and you shall keep a feast to the Lord 7 days." During this week-long festival, Israel would remember their wilderness, wandering by, living in temporary shelters, and offering extensive sacrifices that demonstrated their gratitude for God's provision. God understood that people would make promises to him during times of crisis or gratitude. So he provided detailed laws governing religious vows to protect both the individuals making them and their families. Chapter 30, verse 1 records Moses addressing the tribal leaders. Then Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing which the Lord has commanded." The basic principle was simple, but serious. Verse 2 establishes the fundamental rule. If a man makes a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Once a man made a promise to God, he was absolutely bound to keep it, regardless of changing circumstances or second thoughts. But the situation became more complex when it involved women who lived under the authority of their fathers or husbands in ancient society. Verse 3 introduces the special considerations. Or if a woman makes a vow to the Lord and binds herself by some agreement while in her father's house in her youth. Young unmarried women could make vows, but their fathers had the right to approve or cancel them. A father's response had to be immediate to be effective. Verse 5 explains the time limit. But if her father overrules her on the day that he hears, then none of her vows nor her agreements by which she has bound herself shall stand. And the Lord will release her, because her father overruled her. If the father remained silent, the vow stood. But if he objected immediately, God would release the daughter from her promise. Marriage created a new authority structure that affected existing vows. Verses 6 and 7 describe what happened when a woman with vows got married. If indeed she takes a husband, while bound by her vows or by a rash utterance from her lips, by which she bound herself, and her husband hears it, and makes no response to her on the day that he hears, then her vows shall stand, and her agreements by which she bound herself shall stand. The husband gained the same authority over his wife's vows that her father had previously held. Verse 8 continues. But if her husband overrules her on the day that he hears it, he shall make void her vow which she took and what she uttered with her lips, by which she bound herself, and the Lord will release her. However, certain women had complete authority over their own vows. Verse 9 identifies these exceptions. Also, any vow of a widow or divorced woman, by which she has bound herself, shall stand against her. Women who were no longer under male authority bore full responsibility for their promises to God. Before Moses died, God commanded him to execute judgment against the Midianites, who had led Israel into the terrible sin at Baal Peor. Chapter 31, verse 1 records God's final military order to Moses. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people." This would be Moses' last military campaign, a holy war designed to punish those who had corrupted Israel through sexual immorality and idol worship. Moses organized the expedition carefully. Verse 3 states, "So Moses spoke to the people, saying, 'Arm some of yourselves for war, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord on Midian.'" The army was relatively small but represented all of Israel. Verse 4 describes the force. 1,000 from each tribe, of all the tribes of Israel, you shall send to the war. 12,000 warriors would carry out God's judgment, with each tribe contributing equally to this divine mission. Verse 5 records the actual deployment. So there were recruited from the divisions of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Along with the soldiers went Phinehas the priest, carrying sacred articles and trumpets for battle, ensuring that this was clearly a holy war fought under God's direct authority. The battle was swift and complete. Verse 7 states, "And they warred against the Midianites, just as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed all the males." Israel showed no mercy to the Midianite men who had participated in corrupting God's people. Verse 8 lists some of the important casualties. They killed the kings of Midian with the rest of those who were killed: Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. Balaam the son of Beor they also killed with the sword. Even Balaam, the prophet who had been forced to bless Israel, died in this judgment because he had helped plan the seduction strategy. When the army returned with captives and spoil, Moses was angry that they had spared the women and children. Verse 15 records his rebuke. And Moses said to them, "Have you kept all the women alive?" These women had been the primary instruments of Israel's corruption. Verse 16 explains Moses' anger. "Look, these women caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. The Midianite women had deliberately seduced Israelite men to worship Baal Peor. Moses ordered the execution of all adult women and male children, but allowed the young girls to live. The massive amount of captured livestock and goods required careful distribution according to God's laws for holy war. As Israel camped east of the Jordan River, preparing for the final assault on the Promised Land, 2.5 tribes made an unexpected request that initially alarmed Moses. Chapter 32, verse 1 describes their situation. Now, the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of livestock. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that indeed the region was a place for livestock. The captured territories east of the Jordan were perfect for raising cattle and sheep. And these tribes had enormous herds that needed good pasture land. Verse 2 records their approach to Moses. So the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spoke to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, their request seemed reasonable, but contained a dangerous implication. Verses 3 and 4 contain their proposal. Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eleale, Shebam, Nebo, and Beon. The country which the Lord defeated before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. Therefore they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us over the Jordan. Moses was immediately alarmed by their request. It sounded like they wanted to abandon their brothers and settle comfortably east of the Jordan, while the other tribes fought to conquer the promised land. Verse 6 records his sharp response. And Moses said to the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? Moses reminded them of the terrible consequences when the previous generation had refused to enter the promised land. Verse 13 describes God's judgment. So the Lord's anger was aroused against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. But the tribal representatives quickly clarified their intentions. Verse 16 contains their commitment. Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. They wanted to settle their families and animals in safety, but they weren't planning to abandon the conquest. Verse 17 reveals their true plan. But we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones will dwell in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. They would fight alongside their brothers until the entire promised land was conquered. Moses accepted their proposal with strict conditions. Verse 20 contains his agreement. Then Moses said to them, if you do this thing, if you arm yourselves before the Lord for war. They had to prove their commitment through action, not just words. as Israel stood on the edge of the Promised Land? Moses created a detailed record of their entire wilderness journey, documenting every camping place where they had stopped during 4 decades of wandering. Chapter 33, verse 1, introduces this comprehensive travel log. These are the journeys of the children of Israel, who went out of the land of Egypt by their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron. Verse 2 explains Moses' careful record-keeping. Now Moses wrote down the starting points of their journeys at the command of the Lord, and these are their journeys according to their starting points. This wasn't just a casual travel diary, but an official record commanded by God Himself. The journey began at Ramesses in Egypt. Verse 3 records the Exodus. They departed from Ramesses in the 1st month, on the 15th day of the 1st month. On the day after the Passover, the children of Israel went out with boldness in the sight of all the Egyptians. Israel left Egypt openly and boldly, while their former masters were burying their firstborn sons. Verse 5 marks their first camping place outside Egypt. Then the children of Israel moved from Ramesses and camped at Succoth. From there, the record traces their route through the wilderness, naming every location where the massive congregation had set up their tents. Some stops were brief, lasting only a few days. Others, like Kadesh Barnea, became long-term camps where they stayed for months or years. Verse 14 notes, they moved from Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. Each location held memories of God's provision, their complaints, or significant events. The record includes all 42 camping places from Egypt to the plains of Moab. Verse 49 describes their final position. They camped by the Jordan, from Beth Jesimoth as far as the Abel Acacia Grove in the plains of Moab. After 4 decades of wandering, they had finally reached the edge of their inheritance. This detailed chronicle served multiple purposes. It proved God's faithfulness in leading them safely through the dangerous wilderness, documented the fulfillment of His prediction about 40 years of wandering, and provided a permanent record for future generations of how God had guided their ancestors step by step toward the Promised Land. With the conquest about to begin, God provided precise geographical boundaries for the Promised Land to prevent future disputes about territorial limits. Chapter 34, verse 1, records the beginning of these detailed instructions. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the children of Israel, and say to them, when you come into the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you as an inheritance, the land of Canaan to its boundaries." The southern border was carefully defined. Verse 3 states, "Your southern border shall be from the wilderness of Zin along the border of Edom. Then your southern border shall extend eastward from the end of the Salt Sea." The boundary ran from the Dead Sea westward through specific geographical landmarks. Verse 6 describes the western boundary. "As for the western border, you shall have the Great Sea for a border. This shall be your western border." The Mediterranean Sea formed a natural boundary that needed no further definition. The northern and eastern borders were marked by specific locations and geographical features, creating a clearly defined territory that could be surveyed and divided among the tribes. Verse 13 records Moses' instructions about the division process. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel, saying, "This is the land which you shall inherit by lot, which the Lord has commanded to give to the 9 tribes and to the half-tribe." Within this territory, God designated special cities for the Levites, who would receive no large tribal inheritance. Chapter 35, verse 2 contains His instructions. "Command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in from the inheritance of their possession. And you shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. The Levites would receive 48 cities total, distributed throughout all the tribal territories. Verse 7 states, "So all the cities you will give to the Levites shall be 48 cities. These you shall give with their common land." This arrangement ensured that every tribe had access to Levitical teaching and priestly services. 6 of these Levitical cities had a special designation as cities of refuge. Verse 11 describes their purpose. "Then you shall appoint cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills a person accidentally may flee there." These cities would provide protection for people who killed someone by accident. God established a sophisticated justice system that distinguished between intentional murder and accidental killing, providing protection for the innocent while ensuring that murderers faced appropriate punishment. Verse 12 explains the basic protection offered by refugee cities. "They shall be cities of refuge for you from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation in judgment." The avenger was typically the closest male relative of the victim, who had both the right and responsibility to execute murderers according to ancient law. But refugee cities provided a place where accused killers could receive fair trials instead of immediate revenge. The law carefully distinguished between murder and manslaughter. Verses 16 through 18 define murder. "But if he strikes him with an iron implement, so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he strikes him with a stone in the hand, by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he strikes him with a wooden hand weapon, by which one could die, and he does die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death." Intentional killing with any weapon constituted murder and required the death penalty. Verse 19 identifies who would carry out this sentence. "The avenger of blood himself shall put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death." But accidental killing received different treatment. Verses 22 and 23 describe scenarios that qualified as manslaughter. However, if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws anything at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone, by which a man could die, throwing it at him without seeing him, so that he dies, while he was not his enemy or seeking his harm. The key factors were intent and premeditation. If someone killed another person accidentally, without hatred or planning, they could flee to a refuge city for protection. Verse 25 explains their situation. "So the congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall return him to the city of refuge, where he had fled. And he shall remain there until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the holy oil." Accidental killers had to remain in the refuge city until the current high priest died. This limitation prevented the system from being abused, while still providing genuine protection for the innocent. The final chapter of Numbers addresses a potential problem created by the new inheritance laws that allowed women to inherit land when no male heirs existed. Chapter 36, verse 1 introduces the concerned parties. "Now, the chief fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the leaders, the chief fathers of the children of Israel." These tribal leaders had realized that women's inheritance rights could create an unintended consequence. Verse 2 explains their concern. "And they said, 'The Lord commanded my lord Moses to give the land as an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel. And my lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. The problem became clear in verse 3. Now, if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken from the lot of our inheritance. If Zelophehad's daughters married men from other tribes, their land would effectively transfer to their husbands' tribes, permanently reducing the territory belonging to Manasseh. Over time, this could completely reshape the tribal boundaries that God had established. The Jubilee year wouldn't solve this problem. Verse 4 explains, "And when the Jubilee of the children of Israel comes, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So their inheritance will be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers." Moses recognized the validity of their concern and brought the matter to God. Verse 5 records the divine solution. Then Moses commanded the children of Israel, according to the word of the Lord, saying, "What the tribe of the sons of Joseph speaks is right." God's solution balanced women's inheritance rights with tribal integrity. Verse 6 contains the new requirement. "This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, Let them marry whom they think best, but they may marry only within the family of their father's tribe." Women who inherited land had to marry within their own tribe. Verse 7 explains the reasoning. "So the inheritance of the children of Israel shall not change hands from tribe to tribe. For every one of the children of Israel shall keep the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers." This law prevented tribal territories from being transferred through marriage, while still protecting women's property rights. The daughters of Zelophehad accepted this restriction and married their cousins within the tribe of Manasseh. Verse 11 records their compliance. "For Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad, were married to the sons of their father's brothers." Their marriages preserved both their inheritance rights and their tribe's territorial integrity. If this deep dive into Numbers has opened your eyes to God's incredible faithfulness and detailed care for His people, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss when we uncover more hidden treasures in God's Word. And please share this video with someone who needs to see how God transforms ordinary people into His extraordinary people. Your support helps us continue exploring the Bible in ways that make ancient truths come alive for modern hearts. Until next time, remember, the same God who led Israel through the wilderness is leading you through yours.